Right now, as you're watching this, there are families in parts of the world staring at empty refrigerators, not because they were careless, not because they didn't work hard enough, but because something shifted that was completely outside their control. A geopolitical tension escalated, a supply chain buckled, energy prices climbed just fast enough that transportation slowed, and suddenly the grocery store that was always there wasn't reliable anymore. And here's the part that should make you pause. It never starts with a dramatic collapse. It starts quietly. Gas prices go up a little, then a little more. Trucking slows down. Certain products disappear from shelves. Not all at once, just gradually. First, the exotic stuff, then the name brands. Then one day, you reach for something you've bought 100 times, and it simply isn't there. History doesn't warn you with a siren, it whispers first. So the question we're answering today is not, what do you eat when there's nothing left? That's too late. The real question is, what do you store right now while you still can that will keep your body fueled, your mind sharp, and your family resilient for weeks or even months if the system around you starts to crack? In this video, we're going through 12 specific foods, chosen not just for their shelf life, but for what they actually do inside your body when the easy options are gone. We're talking energy, protein, mineral balance, hydration, mental clarity, and even morale, because survival isn't just physical. And some of the foods at the end of this list are the ones most preppers completely overlook, and they might be the most important ones of all. Welcome to U.S.A. Prepper, where preparation isn't about fear, it's about respect for reality and the quiet confidence that comes from being ready. If you're new here, subscribe right now and hit that like button. It helps more people find this information when they need it most. Let's get into it. Let's start with something that almost nobody talks about when they think about crisis food, and that's the cost of cooking. When most people imagine building a food supply, they think in terms of quantity. How many pounds of rice? How many cans of beans? How many days will this last me? And that's not wrong. Quantity matters. But there's a dimension of preparedness that only becomes visible once you're actually living through a prolonged disruption, and that's the energy it takes to prepare your food. Beans are a classic prepper staple, and for good reason. They're cheap, they're calorie-dense, and they store well. But dried beans require soaking overnight and then boiling for 1 to 3 hours. That's 3 hours of sustained heat, 3 hours of burning through your propane, your firewood, your electricity, whatever fuel source you're relying on. And when fuel becomes scarce, that cost becomes enormous. Suddenly, a pot of beans isn't just dinner, it's a serious decision about resource management. This is exactly why potato flakes deserve a spot near the top of your preparedness list, and why they're so often underestimated. Potato flakes are essentially dehydrated mashed potatoes, stripped of almost all their moisture and processed into a fine, shelf-stable powder. All they need to become a warm, filling, calorie-rich meal is hot water. Not boiling for an hour, not simmering on a stove, just hot water. You could heat water over a single candle if you had to. You could use the last bit of propane in a small camp stove and get multiple meals out of it. The fuel demand is minimal and the result is immediate. From a nutritional standpoint, potato flakes give you carbohydrates, which is your body's primary and most immediate energy currency. When you're under stress, your body burns through carbohydrates fast. Having a quick, reliable carb source that requires almost no preparation isn't a luxury, it's a tactical advantage. Now, the critical caveat with potato flakes, and this applies to almost everything we'll talk about today, is storage. The enemy of potato flakes is moisture. Even a brief exposure to humidity can begin the degradation process, introducing mold, clumping, and accelerated spoilage. You store them in Mylar bags with oxygen absorbers, sealed inside a food-grade bucket, kept in a cool, dry, dark place. Done correctly, potato flakes can last anywhere from 5 to 30 years. Done incorrectly, you might open that container in a crisis and find something completely unusable. The lesson isn't just to have potato flakes, it's to store them right, because preparedness that isn't properly maintained isn't preparedness, it's a false sense of security. Now, speaking of efficient cooking, let's talk about a food that takes the bean concept and dramatically improves on it in almost every practical way. Lentils. Lentils don't require soaking. That alone sets them apart from most other legumes. You can take dried lentils directly from the bag to the pot and have them fully cooked in as little as 15 to 20 minutes. Compare that to kidney beans or chickpeas, which need to soak overnight and then cook for well over an hour, and the difference in fuel consumption becomes staggering when you multiply it across weeks or months of meals. But lentils aren't just fast, they're nutritionally complete in a way that matters during prolonged scarcity. A single cup of cooked lentils gives you roughly 18 grams of protein, nearly 16 grams of fiber, and a meaningful amount of iron, folate, and potassium. They're dense, they're filling, and when you combine them with even a small amount of fat, something we'll get to shortly, they become an extremely effective survival meal that your body can actually use. In prolonged food shortages documented throughout history, lentils appear again and again as a cornerstone food, not because people chose them as a gourmet option, but because they kept people going. They were efficient to store, efficient to cook, and efficient in the body. And on the subject of efficiency, nothing delivers energy more efficiently to the human body than fat. This brings us to ghee. And if you've never thought of ghee as a survival food, this might change your perspective. Fat is the most calorie-dense macronutrient available to us. 1 gram of fat delivers 9 calories, compared to 4 calories per gram of protein or carbohydrate. But more than just raw calories, fat plays a critical role in warmth. Your body uses fat as a slow-burning fuel source that helps maintain core body temperature, particularly important in cold conditions or during physical exertion when the environment isn't cooperating. The problem with most fats in a survival scenario is stability. Butter spoils. Vegetable oils can go rancid, especially once opened. Lard, without refrigeration, has a limited window. These are fats that work beautifully in a normal kitchen and fall apart when the refrigerator stops working. Ghee is different because of how it's made. Ghee is clarified butter, butter that has been slowly heated until all the water content evaporates and the milk solids are removed. What's left is almost pure butterfat, and because water and milk proteins are the primary drivers of spoilage in dairy products, removing them dramatically extends ghee's shelf life. Properly sealed ghee stored in a cool, dark environment can remain stable for 1 to 2 years at room temperature, and even longer if kept away from heat and light. A small amount of ghee added to lentils or potato flakes doesn't just improve the flavor, it transforms the nutritional profile of the meal, adding sustained energy, improving the absorption of fat-soluble vitamins, and providing the caloric density that keeps you warm and functional when activity levels are high and environmental conditions are harsh. There's something almost elegant about the combination of these 3 foods, potato flakes, lentils, and ghee. They represent fuel efficiency, nutritional completeness, and energy density. They're the foundation on which everything else gets built. But a foundation is only the beginning. Once your energy needs are covered, your body starts demanding something else entirely. Calories keep you alive. Protein keeps you functional. That distinction matters more than most people realize until they're living through the reality of it. You can eat enough calories every single day, enough to feel full, enough to move around, and still experience a steady physical decline if those calories are coming entirely from carbohydrates with little to no protein in the mix. Muscles fatigue faster. Recovery from physical effort slows dramatically. Tasks that should be simple start requiring more effort than they should, and over time, even basic physical functioning becomes a struggle. The reason this happens is because your body continuously breaks down and repairs muscle tissue. It's a constant process, not just something that happens when you're exercising. And the raw material for that repair process is protein, specifically the amino acids that protein breaks down into. Without a steady protein supply, your body starts breaking down existing muscle to source those amino acids elsewhere, and the decline that follows is gradual but relentless. In a normal environment, protein isn't hard to come by. Eggs, meat, dairy, fish, these are high-quality protein sources available almost everywhere. But every single one of those sources depends on refrigeration or immediate consumption. Without a functioning cold chain, your protein supply disappears within days. This is the exact problem that egg powder solves. Egg powder is whole eggs, whites and yolks together, that have been pasteurized and spray-dried into a shelf-stable powder. When kept sealed and dry, egg powder retains its full nutritional profile for years. And eggs are one of the most complete protein sources available to humans, containing all 9 essential amino acids in proportions that the body can actually use efficiently. The practical applications during a crisis are significant. Egg powder can be reconstituted with water and scrambled, used to add protein to other meals, incorporated into simple baked goods if flour is available, or even consumed mixed into a liquid as a quick nutritional supplement. It doesn't require refrigeration, it doesn't expire quickly, it doesn't demand complex preparation. People who have lived through extended grid outages or supply disruptions consistently describe the same experience. There was enough food, but it wasn't the right food. Carbohydrates were available, but protein was missing. And the physical toll of that absence showed up in ways they didn't anticipate: weakness, fatigue, slow recovery from minor physical strain. The body needs building material, and egg powder is one of the most shelf-stable ways to provide it. But protein alone isn't the whole story of physical resilience. There's a deeper layer of structural support that the body depends on, one that almost never gets discussed in preparedness circles, and that's the maintenance of connective tissue, joints, and the mineral infrastructure of bones. This is where bone broth powder enters the picture. Think about what happens to the human body under prolonged physical and psychological stress. You're not just tired, you're running with elevated cortisol, disrupted sleep, reduced recovery time, and probably physical activity demands that are higher than normal. Under those conditions, the body's ability to maintain and repair connective tissue, the tendons, ligaments, cartilage, and joint surfaces that allow you to move, is under constant pressure. Fresh bone broth is one of the most effective traditional recovery foods in human history. Long-simmered bones release collagen, gelatin, calcium, magnesium, and phosphorus in a form that the body absorbs efficiently. But fresh bone broth requires bones, time, and heat, none of which are reliable in a crisis. Bone broth powder, on the other hand, is bone broth that has been reduced and dried into a concentrated, shelf-stable form. Sealed properly, it can last for years. You dissolve it in hot water, and within minutes you have a mineral-rich liquid that supports bone density, joint health, and connective tissue repair. The accounts from people who've navigated prolonged scarcity are consistent on this point. They reached a phase, usually weeks in, where even though calorie intake was adequate, their bodies simply stopped recovering normally. Unexplained soreness, stiff joints, a general sense of physical deterioration that didn't match the amount of rest they were getting. Often, this was a mineral and collagen deficiency playing out in real time. Bone broth powder doesn't fill you up. It doesn't replace a meal, but it addresses the structural layer of physical function that calories and protein alone cannot reach. And then there's gelatin, which is closely related to bone broth but deserves its own discussion because it targets something slightly different. If bone broth powder is about maintaining structure, gelatin is about recovery. Specifically, the capacity to repair soft tissue damage, maintain digestive health, and keep joints flexible under ongoing stress. Gelatin is derived from collagen, the most abundant protein in the human body. It's what keeps skin elastic, joints lubricated, the intestinal lining intact, and connective tissue resilient. Under normal circumstances, a varied diet that includes meat cooked on the bone, fish, and organ meats provides enough collagen precursors to keep these systems functioning. In a survival diet built primarily around grains, legumes, and dried goods, those collagen precursors disappear almost entirely. The result isn't dramatic or sudden. It's the kind of decline that builds slowly, increasing joint stiffness, digestive discomfort, slower wound healing, a general sense of physical fragility that compounds over time. Gelatin in dry powdered form is one of the simplest ways to interrupt that decline. It dissolves in warm liquid. It can be added to soups, broths, or even plain water. It stores essentially indefinitely in dry conditions. Recovery isn't a luxury in a prolonged crisis. It's the mechanism that allows you to function on day 30 the way you functioned on day 1. And the difference between a prepared person and an unprepared one, weeks into a disruption, often comes down to whether their body is still capable of the basic repair processes that most of us take completely for granted. Energy keeps you going. Protein keeps you strong. Structure and recovery keep you from gradually falling apart. But there's one more dimension of survival that is perhaps the most underestimated of all, and it has nothing to do with muscles or joints. It lives entirely between your ears. Here's something that very few preparedness resources talk about honestly. You can have enough food and still lose the ability to function effectively because your mind starts to go before your body does. Not dramatically, not in the way that movies portray. It's subtle. Concentration starts requiring more effort. Decision-making slows down. Simple problem-solving that used to feel automatic suddenly demands conscious effort. Emotional regulation becomes harder. Small frustrations feel disproportionately large. And if you don't know why this is happening, it's genuinely frightening, and it tends to spiral. Much of this cognitive erosion isn't caused by hunger. It's caused by micronutrient deficiency. Specifically the B vitamins, thiamine, B6, and B12, which are the chemical backbone of healthy nervous system function. These vitamins are responsible for the synthesis of neurotransmitters, the insulation of nerve fibers, the conversion of food into usable brain energy, and a dozen other processes that keep your cognitive function stable. In a normal diet, B vitamins come from meat, dairy, eggs, leafy vegetables, and whole grains. In a survival diet stripped of fresh food, they begin to disappear within weeks. And the deficiency that follows isn't just fatigue, it's a measurable decline in the cognitive capacity that survival depends on most. Nutritional yeast addresses this problem directly. It's one of the richest plant-based sources of B vitamins available, with significant amounts of B1, B2, B3, B6, and B12 in a single serving. It's a deactivated yeast, meaning it has no leavening function and no active cultures, so it stores easily in a sealed container kept away from moisture and heat. Its shelf life, properly stored, extends for years. Nutritional yeast also provides a modest but meaningful amount of complete protein and trace minerals, making it nutritionally layered rather than single-purpose. A tablespoon or two added to a lentil soup or stirred into warm water with bone broth powder costs almost nothing in terms of preparation, but can meaningfully support nervous system health over weeks and months of micronutrient-restricted eating. The documented cases of cognitive decline in otherwise well-fed people during extended isolation or scarcity are striking when you read them. People eating enough calories, drinking enough water, maintaining basic physical function, but struggling to read, to plan, to remember, to stay emotionally stable. Often, targeted B vitamin supplementation reversed these symptoms within days. That's how rapidly the nervous system responds to. Now, alongside the cognitive dimension, there's a hormonal one that affects energy, body temperature regulation, immune response, and metabolic rate, and it hinges almost entirely on a single mineral that most survival diets completely lack: iodine. Your thyroid gland requires iodine to produce the hormones that regulate virtually every metabolic process in your body. When iodine is abundant, as it is in a diet containing seafood, dairy, and iodized salt, your thyroid functions quietly and invisibly, and you never think about it. When iodine becomes deficient, the effects accumulate gradually. Persistent fatigue that sleep doesn't resolve, increased cold sensitivity, slowed metabolism, reduced physical and mental endurance, immune suppression. The insidious quality of iodine deficiency is that it doesn't feel like a deficiency. It feels like general decline. It feels like you're just tired, just cold, just not recovering well. And because it happens slowly, it's easy to attribute to everything except its actual cause. There are two foods on your preparedness shelf that can prevent this entirely. The first is iodized salt. Not just salt, but iodized salt specifically. Regular sea salt, Himalayan salt, and kosher salt contain essentially no iodine. Iodized table salt is one of the simplest and most cost-effective ways to ensure continuous iodine intake regardless of what else is available. Salt also never expires. It preserves food, maintains electrolyte balance, and historically has served as one of the most universally valuable trade commodities humans have ever used. A 5-pound bag of iodized salt stored in a sealed container is one of the highest value preparedness investments you can make per dollar spent. The second iodine source is dried seaweed, and it's worth understanding why this earns its own place on the list rather than just deferring to iodized salt alone. Dried seaweed, particularly varieties like nori, wakame, and kombu, contains iodine in concentrations that are extraordinarily high relative to its weight and volume. A small amount, even a few grams, provides iodine levels that meaningfully support thyroid function. But beyond iodine, dried seaweed delivers a spectrum of trace minerals that are difficult to source from land-based foods: magnesium, calcium, iron, zinc, manganese, and selenium, among others. These minerals collectively support hormone production, immune function, and cellular health in ways that are difficult to replicate from a limited pantry. Dried seaweed is extremely lightweight, takes up minimal storage space, requires no refrigeration, and lasts for years in a sealed, dry environment. It can be crumbled into soups, reconstituted in warm water, or eaten as is. The entry cost, both financially and in terms of storage space, is minimal. The nutritional return is significant. Now, two foods that approach the challenge of long-term resilience from entirely different angles but complement each other almost perfectly are chia seeds and canned coconut milk. Chia seeds address one of the least discussed survival vulnerabilities: water efficiency. When people think about survival hydration, they think about having enough water. And yes, water supply is critical, but there's a secondary question that matters almost as much. How efficiently is your body retaining and using the water it receives? Under stress, with elevated physical activity and disrupted electrolyte balance, the body can lose water faster than intake replaces it, even when intake seems adequate. The result is a chronic low-level dehydration that degrades cognitive function, physical performance, digestion, and emotional stability in ways that are easy to misattribute. Chia seeds, when soaked in water, absorb up to 12 times their weight in liquid and form a gel. When consumed, this gel slows the rate at which water passes through the digestive system, effectively extending hydration by improving moisture retention. They also provide omega-3 fatty acids, soluble fiber, and a modest amount of protein, all of which support digestive health and sustained energy. In a situation where water sources are limited, unpredictable, or require significant effort to collect and purify, the ability to get more physiological mileage out of every glass of water consumed is not a trivial benefit. It's a genuine survival multiplier. Canned coconut milk tackles a related but distinct problem: the bioavailability of the nutrients you're already consuming. Many of the most important vitamins, A, D, E, and K, are fat-soluble, meaning they can only be absorbed by the body in the presence of dietary fat. In a survival diet that's built heavily around grains and legumes with minimal fat content, these vitamins may technically be present but functionally unavailable. You're eating them, but your body can't access them. The fat-soluble vitamin stores in your body, which are meaningful at the start of a crisis, deplete over time, and without fat in the diet to support absorption, replenishing them becomes impossible regardless of what else you eat. Canned coconut milk provides a stable, refrigeration-free fat source that solves this problem directly. Adding it to lentil soups, to potato flakes, or to any grain-based meal doesn't just improve flavor and satiety, it activates the fat-soluble vitamin absorption that the rest of your carefully stored nutritional profile depends on. It transforms a calorie delivery meal into a nutrient delivery meal. Coconut milk is also rich in medium-chain triglycerides, a type of fat that the body converts to energy more readily than long-chain fats, providing a quicker energy source without the blood sugar spike associated. And finally, we arrive at something that is rarely mentioned in the same breath as survival nutrition, but that people who have actually lived through extended disruptions consistently identify as one of the most psychologically significant factors in their experience: morale. Dried mushrooms. This might seem like an odd note to end on, but consider what happens to the psychological relationship with food when every meal is the same. Lentils in the morning, lentils at night, potato flakes when you need quick energy, the occasional addition of egg powder. Nutritionally complete, functionally adequate, and within 2 to 3 weeks, unbearable. This isn't weakness, it's biology. Humans evolved as highly varied eaters. Our brains are wired to associate novelty in food with safety and abundance, and repetition with scarcity and threat. When every meal tastes and feels the same, something quietly erodes, not just enjoyment, but the motivation to eat adequately, to maintain routines, to maintain the sense of normalcy that supports psychological stability. Dried mushrooms occupy almost no storage space. They weigh almost nothing, they cost very little, and when soaked in warm water for 20 to 30 minutes, they rehydrate into something that fundamentally changes the sensory experience of a meal. Rich, earthy, deeply savory flavor, and a meaty texture that triggers completely different taste receptors than anything else in a basic survival pantry. Beyond morale, dried mushrooms bring real nutritional value. B vitamins, vitamin D in varieties that have been sun-dried, selenium, potassium, and beta-glucans that support immune function. They're genuinely nutritious, but the reason they make this list, the reason people who have lived through extended food insecurity specifically mention variety as a survival factor, is because of what they do for the relationship between a person and their food. Survival isn't only about the body enduring, it's about the person inside that body retaining enough normalcy, enough sensory familiarity, enough small comforts to keep going with intention and purpose. A bowl of lentil soup with rehydrated mushrooms, a splash of coconut milk, seasoned with iodized salt and a small piece of dried seaweed. That's not just nutrition, that's a meal. And meals matter for more than calories. When you look at these 12 foods together, potato flakes, lentils, ghee, egg powder, bone broth powder, gelatin, iodized salt, dried seaweed, nutritional yeast, chia seeds, canned coconut milk, and dried mushrooms, what you're looking at is a complete system, not just calorie storage. A system that addresses energy, protein, structural support, recovery, hormonal balance, cognitive function, hydration efficiency, nutrient absorption, and morale. None of these foods require refrigeration. All of them store for years when handled correctly. Together, they cover almost every biological vulnerability that emerges during prolonged disruption, the ones that people who have actually lived through these situations learned about the hard way. Preparedness isn't about fear. It never has been. It's about the quiet, steady confidence that comes from having done the work before it was urgent, from understanding that stability is fragile, that supply chains are not guarantees, and that the small decisions you make today, while shelves are still full and options are still easy, are the ones that define your resilience when everything changes. Start small if you need to. Add 1 or 2 of these foods to your next grocery run. Store them properly. Build the system gradually. But start. Because the families that make it through disruption intact aren't the ones who had the most, they're the ones who had the right things, stored the right way, and understood why each one mattered. If this video gave you something valuable, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment below telling us which of these 12 foods surprised you most. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time, because this is only the beginning of what we cover here at U.S.A. Prepper. We'll see you in the next one. Stay ready.